Welcome to That's Good Sports. I am Brandon. I am properly rated by everyone but God, Perna. God has me as 4.21 billionth best human on earth. Basically, a billion wrong. And that's why I stopped going to church. Today, we're counting down the top 6 most underrated quarterbacks in the NFL heading into the 2020 season if it happens. Why 6, though? Well, because 5 is for douchebags and 10 is for pretentious college grads. I will have a bunch of NFL news to catch you up on tomorrow, and I will have showered so I don't have to wear a hat. But today, I wanted to dish about quarterbacks. Whew, that's good sports. As the uncertainty of sports gets ever more uncertain, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Today's episode is sponsored by Raycon and the Everyday E25 earbuds. When you think of me, I want you to think of how I take care of your holes. Today, I'm loving your ear holes and telling you about the comfortable E25 earbuds, which give you 6 hours of playtime, Bluetooth pairing, and more bass than you will find on a baseball diamond. I've had my Raycons for close to a year now. My wife has a pair of rose gold Raycons, and my favorite thing about them is the battery life. I use mine all the time and I rarely have to charge them. The Everyday E25s cost about half the price of other premium wireless earbuds and are designed for a noise isolating fit. So click my link in the description and use code TGS15 to get 15% off your order. And as an expecting father, I have been listening to loops of screaming babies. And I am not terrified at all. I can do it. Before we start this official quarterback list, consider this question. What makes a quarterback underrated? Is he underrated by the fans, the media, or the NFL itself? You could take someone like Dak Prescott and say he's underrated by the fans, overrated by the media, and properly rated by a team that doesn't want to pay him like a top 5 quarterback, but will have to do just that now that he signed his $31.5 million tender. Or you have a guy like Josh Allen, who's probably overrated by his own Bills fans, underrated by other fans, and maybe just not acknowledged enough by sports media. In terms of underrating a quarterback, it's generally a combination of those 3 things: fans, NFL, and media. Although it's generally the actual NFL decision makers who tend to rate quarterbacks the most accurately of those 3 parties. Jared Goff and the Rams notwithstanding. But then again, sometimes there's a quarterback so underrated by teams that they're not even on a team. That can happen because of money and the strangeness of the quarterback market, certain manners in which a player might observe the national anthem, or injury. The second quarterback on this list checks 2 of those boxes, but we'll start with number 6, and that is Daniel Jones. If not for Daniel Jones' crippling fumble addiction that plagued him last season, we would have remembered his rookie year a lot more fondly. Because when you look at the numbers, he didn't have any problem moving the ball. 3,000 passing yards in 12 games and 24 tutties. And he did a lot of this with an ankle-injured Saquon Barkley to give the ball to. The fans and the media did kind of a 180 on Daniel Jones. When he was drafted at 6, everyone made fun of the Giants. Then he played great in his first game, so everyone called Dave Gettleman a genius. Then he hit a rough patch immediately following his debut, going 4 straight weeks where his touchdowns did not outnumber his turnovers, and finally finished out pretty evenly, sparked by a 4-touchdown game against the Lions the first week they were without Matthew Stafford. 18 fumbles though, 18 for Jones in 12 starts. Not going to win very often like that. If he can just not do that, think of how good he might be. My biggest question, though, about Daniel Jones is how will he play against good teams? Every game that he threw for more than 2 touchdowns came against shitty teams, the Lions, Jets, and the Washington Potatoes. And the Giants managed to still lose 2 of the games he played well in. Now factor in a new head coach and a gaping hole at kicker and whatever the hell is going to happen with DeAndre Baker, and Jones really has the cards stacked against him. So why the hell did I put him on this stupid list? I don't know, I think he's all right. New thing on That's Good Sports, when I take off my hat, You know I mean business. Coming in at number 5, Cameron Newton. How the hell is he not on a team? If I had to choose right now between Cam Newton and Ben Roethlisberger, I'd take Cam. I would take Cam over Phillip Rivers too. And I would probably take Cam over everyone else on this list if I'm being completely honest. In 2018, he played 14 games with a bad shoulder and still threw 24 touchdowns, completing 67.9% of his passes with just 13 picks. Those were better numbers than Phillip Rivers last year, and Cam doesn't need a hover round to move outside of the pocket like Phil. Now it's kind of blowing my mind that teams are showing more interest in Colin Kaepernick than they are in Cam Newton right now. Yes, we know the social implications and the good optics that a team can get from just mentioning that they're looking at Cap. But Cam was better, is better, and has played football in the last 3 seasons. I hope Colin Kaepernick ends up on a team, if for nothing else than good content here, but Cam should too, as long as he's willing to accept at least a competition at the quarterback spot. We're at the point where there's no more excuses that he can't be looked at by a team doctor, so as long as his shoulder still rotates and is attached to his arm, some team will end up with the most overqualified backup quarterback in the league. It's possible that Cam is playing the long game, waiting for one of 32 starting quarterbacks to get injured so that he has leverage signing a deal plus a starting job right away. Number 4, quarterback, underrated, Baker Mayfield. Ooh, sexy one here. Mayfield essentially went from overrated to underrated in 1 calendar year. That in and of itself makes him properly rated. Crap, that makes me sound stupid. All it took was one of the worst head coaches in recent memory to fuck things up for Baker. A bunch of acquisitions that didn't help the offense and some weird facial hair choices. But now the Browns have invested in the offensive line, have a more competent and handsome head coach in Kevin Stefanski, which is what the movie Moneyball tried to tell all of us with Brad Pitt. I know he wasn't the coach, but you get my point. Now Baker has gone from Rookie of the Year, best quarterback in his draft class after 1 year, to getting called a bust, becoming Colin Cowherd's punching bag, which is bad considering how weak Cowherd's arms are, and getting totally lapped by Lamar Jackson. And a lot of people are wondering if he's even the long-term solution in Cleveland. A lot of that criticism is fair. He threw 21 picks and averaged 6 yards per attempt in year 2. But it's also exaggerated because of the bad coaching situation. He got too much credit after his rookie year, and now he's getting too much blame after his second season. The true, or real Baker Mayfield is probably somewhere in the middle, waiting to throw like 24 touchdowns and 13 picks, and lead the Browns to a wild card spot in 2020. Wait, those are the exact same numbers Cam had from 2018. So Mayfield needs 26 touchdowns, 12 picks. Yeah, that's better. And I think Mayfield will succeed because Kevin Stefanski knows how to use a Chubb, unlike Freddie Kitchens, who was still just surprised anyone was even interested in his Chubb. Number 3, my man, Gardner Minshew. Now, rarely do you find a quarterback who gets a ton of undeserved hype because he looks like the alligator wrestling man we all want to be, and then actually plays up close to that level of hype, but then gets benched for no other reason than the guy behind him is getting paid too much money. That is exactly what happened to Gardner Minshew in 2019. He was exceeding expectations, played 1 bad game in London, got benched, and then was put back into the starting lineup. His numbers were not flashy, but very, very efficient, and if you took the time to actually watch him play, then you would witness him do some special things on the field and not just caress his hair before putting on his helmet, even though that was perfect too. The dude is scrappy, like a modern-day Jake Plummer. Take a look at how Gardner Minshew's numbers compare to Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray won Rookie of the Year, but did he deserve that award more than Minshew? Or is it that Murray was the first overall pick and Minshew was a 6th round pick, playing for a team losing a star player every week? That was a question. You can answer it in the comments. Murray started all 16 games while Minshew started 12 and played in 14, but Minshew still had 1 more touchdown pass, half the interceptions, and roughly the same passing yards per game. Murray had 9 more rushing yards per game and 4 more rushing touchdowns, but that's really the only stat where he had the big upper hand. Now, they were both on pretty bad teams, but Murray was 5-10-1 in Arizona, while Minshew was 6-6 with the Jags, a team that went 0-4 in games started by Nick Foles. Minshew, again, threw half of the interceptions to Kyler's 12 with just 6, and was sacked 15 fewer times and roughly 2 fewer starts. For a guy who was not projected to start the season, those are signs he gets how to play the game of football. Oh, and he gets it well. Shout out to Minshew is better than Murray Westkovich on Patreon for linking me to some of those stats. Number 2, Sam Darnold. Lost in the bizarre year for Sam Darnold and the Jets is the fact that Darnold actually finished the year with a winning record. Believe it or not. If not for a nameless New York street urchin penetrating Darnold's mouth with his or her slimy infected tongue, the Jets very well could have had an overall winning record in 2019. Darnold got better as the year went on, and from year 1 to year 2, he improved in just about every meaningful stat, and like Baker Mayfield, he had a shitty coach. And he still does, actually. The difference, though, between Kitchens and Gase is Gase actually understands the X's and O's, while the only O's Kitchens understood were booty O's. They are delicious. Darnold also was lacking a lot of help on offense. One of the worst offensive lines in the league, minimal production coming from their high-priced free agent Le'Veon Bell, and had his promising tight end Chris Herndon out for most of the year. Plus, remember, Darnold is going to be 23 this season. Compare that to Joe Burrow, a rookie who will also be 23 this season. In my humble opinion, Darnold did the most with the least, which is why he's number 2 on this list. Now, before we get to number 1, you could argue a guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick should be on this list. After losing their first 7 games and fully committing to Fitzpatrick over Josh Rosen, the Dolphins then finished with a 5-4 record with wins against the Eagles, Colts, and Patriots. Ryan wasn't perfect, but he played with heart. God damn it. He was good enough to beat the decent teams I just mentioned, but also bad enough to lose to the Giants, Jets, and Browns. Fitzmagic, like a real magician, will never do what you expect. Which, unfortunately, also means play well when you think he will. Now, another Ryan, Tannehill, I do not think is underrated, but I think he has the most to prove as a quarterback in 2020. After winning Offensive Rookie of the Year, you can't put Kyler Murray on this list. Too well known at this point, although with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins to his receiving core, I think he will be even better in 2020. And I've been telling you for years that Phillip Rivers is overrated, so there's no way I would ever put him on this official list. But never rule out a new setting for a veteran quarterback. It will either be a horrible mistake or we will all be pleasantly surprised how well the guy plays with new coaches and players around him, even though he had pretty good coaches and players around him while throwing 20 interceptions last season. One thing is for sure, the Colts should be getting more yards through the air. I do think Rivers will make the offense more formidable and productive. As Cody Felger's tweet points out, the Colts were 29th in passing yards in 2019. Philly Riv had the Chargers 6th. But needs to cut those interceptions in half to be successful. So here we are, number 1. You thought I was gonna say Drew Lock, didn't you? But I would not curse him like that. If anything, he's probably getting overhyped by the media. I believe he has the potential to be great, but I want a bigger sample size to make my ultimate determination there. I think the most underrated quarterback heading into 2020 is Matthew Stafford. I did this whole episode so I could just talk about Matthew Stafford. The best quarterback who went from a little overweight to a little underweight. I love the guy who just can't quite get it right. Look at it like this. Baker, Minshew, Jones, Darnold, all very young quarterbacks. Stafford is heading into his 12th season, and nobody expects shit from him. Before suffering microfractures in his back last year, Stafford was on pace to throw 38 touchdowns and 10 picks, and maybe 5,000 yards. His interception ratio of 1.7% was tied for the second best of his career. I don't like much of what the Lions have done personnel-wise over the last year, but I think Stafford is a perennially underrated QB who has always outperformed the level of talent the Lions have as a whole. Stafford had Calvin Johnson for the first 7 years of his career, but who's the best player he's ever handed the ball to? Kerryon Johnson? Maybe. The point is that he hasn't gotten a lot of help outside of Megatron, who retired in his prime. Not to take anything away from Kenny Golladay. I do think a lot of Stafford's numbers come after the game has been decided, but Stafford also doesn't have a lot of margin of error with the Lions roster, and he doesn't get enough credit for what he does in spite of the team around him. My biggest point with Stafford from last season is the Lions won 0 games after he got hurt, and he had a losing record. He had a losing record at 3-4-1. That's why he's the #1 best losing quarterback of all time, primed to get the Lions to 8-8 at best. Underrated. To recap, we had Daniel Jones, Cam Newton, Baker Mayfield, Gardner Minshew, Sam Darnold, and Matthew Stafford as the most underrated quarterbacks in the NFL, according to me, whose ability to rate things also underrated. If I know anything, it's that this time next year, we'll have a completely different sense of who is underrated and who is overrated. Hell, we might not even have a single football game in 2020, and I guarantee people's perceptions of most NFL quarterbacks will change. And if there is no football, at least we will know Tom Brady will have aged 1 year to the number 44. Thanks for watching another episode of That's Good Sports. Please subscribe here on YouTube, on Twitter, Instagram, at Brandon Perna, if you care to follow me there. And shout out to everyone who donated to the Alzheimer's charity longest day event. We hit our team goal, raised $5,000. You guys are amazing.